And I want to talk a little bit now about another Poway City Councilman, and it's Peter DeHoff. Now, there's a couple of angles to this whole story here. Peter DeHoff is the council member for District 3, and he's my representative. I live in District 3. I don't think I've ever met Peter. I've seen him up on city council. I've seen him on social media. He's even been a participant in the community forum here on the John Riley Project podcast. And Peter, thanks for being involved in the community. Well, there's a lot of people that are angry with Peter DeHoff right now. There are a lot of people that are calling for his resignation. So this is incredible. I mean, we got Brian Pepin stepped down. There was a controversy about an appointment or an election to replace him. They ended up doing the appointment. Then we have the whole Tony Blaine, situation that's blowing up, and everything that's coming along with the censure and, potential illegal activity. And now there's a recall of Peter DeHoff that's brewing. And I'm not sure if organizers around this, how far along they are, but it's interesting how this is all coming forward. Now, I'm trying to pick up the vibes on some of this. Some of this is that I'm privy to a certain amount of information. Some of it, frankly, I've been blocked from being able to view some of the conversation on this, but I'm going to tell you what I know. And if there's additional comments, facts around this situation, or if I need to be corrected, by all means, let me know, either in social media or here in the live stream. But there are a lot of people now that are really angry with Peter DeHoff for a number of different reasons. I mean, in one of the most recent meetings, he gave like a 20-minute, essentially, bully pulpit speech up on the die. And a lot of people really didn't like that. They felt he was being condescending and talking down to people. There were a lot of other challenges that Peter DeHoff was receiving. They didn't like his stance about housing. They didn't like his stance about lifetime fitness, and they're just tired of him. And they want him to go. And so you're finding that, here in Poway, we have sort of a vocal minority. And these are folks, I mean, one of the figureheads of that group is Chris Cruz. And there's a number of other names. If you're on Poway social media, you know many of them. But they're a loud voice, but they're definitely a minority. And they've historically lost every election until Prop H, where the lifetime fitness facility that was proposed on the farm that was going to change the plan to allow this, massive 90,000 square foot facility and, indoor, outdoor, which was dramatically more than the 3,000 square foot plan. When that was implemented, and when that plan came forward, the city council approved it to the point that, they said it complied, or they made modifications to zoning to say it complied, and then put it up for the vote for the city council. Well, this vocal minority was upset with that. Of course, they wanted it to lose, and it did lose. I mean, there was a very unpopular loss. I think it was like 31% yes, 69% no on this Prop H for the fitness. What was it called? It was Fitness Elite, if I'm trying to remember the name. And so Peter DeHoff was supportive of that. He's been, according to some, speaking down to other council members, and has been, a guy that a lot of people have been just kind of fed up with, and they just were tired of him. And they said, we need to get rid of this guy. We need to have a recall on Peter DeHoff. I'm just kind of going here back to my notes. And excuse me, here it is. They were upset that he was aligned with Mayor Vaus. There was an unwillingness to listen to city citizens in Poway. They just didn't like his whole act. They didn't like his whole presentation. And they certainly didn't like a lot of his commentary on social media. So it's interesting. There's been a lot of anger here in town on various levels, but the vocal minority, in my opinion, I think is feeling empowered. They're feeling that, maybe they got a little bit of wind on their back, wind in their sails, and that they might be able to capitalize on making some other changes here. And when I first saw this recall initiative, I was surprised at first. I mean, because this, generally speaking, the loud minority in Poway, many of them were very supportive of the recall of Mayor Vaus a few years ago. And that initiative didn't even get enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. Okay, so there's already, generally speaking, a resistance to doing these recalls. And recalls, by the way, are a pain to accomplish. Now, just as an aside, that's how Mayor Steve Vaus kind of got into politics in Poway. He organized a recall of Betty Rexford back in, what was it, 2010, 2011 or 12, back in that time frame. It was a kind of a rare thing here in Poway. And frankly, recalls, you need to get a lot of signatures, probably need to have a special election. You got to jump through a lot of hoops. So usually there's a very high threshold of violations or immoral activity that would drive the citizenry to go to such an extent to do a recall election. But there is a lot of momentum here. And I'm thinking to myself, is it? I mean, granted, Peter DeHoff is my representative. Peter DeHoff and again, I've never met him. I don't really have any relationship with him, but I see what he talks about, see what he comments on. And, just like any other politician, there are some things I agree with him and there's some things I disagree with him. But, you're going to get that with any politician. And the categories where I disagree with him, I'm not sure if they necessarily rise to the level of a recall. Now, I, generally speaking, like the whole idea of recalls and the whole idea of threats of recalls, because it keeps local politicians on their toes. It keeps them engaged and hopefully listening to the community and implementing votes and law and policies that are largely aligned with the people that put them in office. So the concept of a recall is not necessarily anything I object to. Frankly, I think it's a great thing. It's an important part of democracy. But then I thought, does this rise to the level? Now, guess what happened? There is a brand new YouTube channel called Recall Peter DeHoff. And so if you want to go on YouTube, you check it out. And there is a 20-minute video that was taken from the live stream of the Poway City Council meeting. And it was this bully pulpit message of Peter DeHoff's. And I watched this and it was amazing. It was amazing. And there's a lot of things to comment on. And I kind of want to go through it. And, what I probably should have done is played part of the video and hit pause, and watch it with you. But it's a 20-minute video. It probably ended up taking me an hour and a half by including all my comments on it. But he was responding in the city council meeting to the people that have been attacking him, that have been coming after him and other members of city council that have been for an election to replace Brian Pepin. And he had a lot to say and he had a lot to get off his chest. And he went aggressively defending the appointment process and attacking those that were pushing for the public vote. People like Hiram Soto, Chris Cruz, there's a whole list of them. And frankly, I'm one of those too. I mean, I am a supporter of, letting people vote on putting representatives up on the city council. Because after all, if there's an appointment for a replacement for Brian Pepin in District 1, then if you do it as an appointment, then the people that pick the replacement for Brian Pepin, none of them are living in District 1 because they're the representatives from 2, 3, and 4. And then Mayor Vaus doesn't live in District 1 either. I mean, it would be the opposite of representative democracy. But there's always hesitation. Do we want to do another election? It's going to cost money. And really, it's not that much money. I mean, the number $300,000 was getting thrown around a lot. But, keep in mind that the city's budget is like over $100 million. I think it's like $130 million a year they spend. Can they afford an election? Yeah, they can. And then there's resistance to doing a recall, or not a recall election, but a special election by mail, because there's a lot of, Republicans that are suspicious of mail-in votes. And there's been a lot of objection to that. But I want to talk about what Peter said. And first of all, I love the fact that he did what he did. Now, I'm not going to say I agreed with what he said, but I like it when politicians get up there and at a city council meeting and will tell you what they think. And they're going to let you know what they're fighting for and why. And they'll explain themselves. And whether they do it in a public setting like a city council meeting or at a community forum or in a newspaper column, those are all great. If they're podcast guests, and every politician is invited to be a guest on my podcast if you'd like to join me here. If you're a candidate or in a sitting politician. So Peter, if you want to join in the conversation, you're welcome to join me here in a future podcast. But I like the fact that he had something to say and he was brave enough to go out there and say it. And I wish more of our politicians would do that. Sometimes you kind of wonder really what they're thinking, and people are trying to read between lines. And then there's a lot of conspiracy theories about what people think. But when they tell you, like Peter did, you're like, okay, here we go, face value. So one of the things he said is that, when you get an election, you don't know who you're going to get. You might have some good people, bad people. It's kind of a mix. He says, but generally, when we do this appointment process, we get a lot of really good candidates, and they're really qualified candidates. And we have an opportunity to kind of sift through them very carefully. And the good news is that in Poway, we've got tremendous talent. There's a lot of really good people here. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's true. There is a lot of good people. And yeah, you guys could make a well-informed decision. I don't question that. But the question is should you be the ones making that decision? And so this whole thing, the whole time he's talking, when some of our vocal minority was angry with him, thinking that Peter DeHoff was talking down to them from the that city council meeting, to me, it seemed more like the philosopher king. It's kind of like Plato's cave where, we as humans, we're regular people. We can't understand reality. We need a philosopher king to tell us what reality is, to tell us what's good and bad, and to really pontificate and be the one that can interpret, what is actually happening. And so I can understand the condescending tone to it, but come on, that's no reason to recall the guy. It's just who he is. And you can tell that he's an intelligent guy and he's well-read. He understands a lot of policy, and he's kind of a technocrat, kind of a, like a wonky politician that really gets into the weeds of a lot of the detail. And I think if I recall, Peter's background is in technology. I think he's an engineer, if I recall, but certainly he's a scientist. He's in that space. And so his approach to this is what you would expect from someone that's good at doing analysis. But, he definitely feels he has a right to share what his thoughts are. And frankly, he's elected. And that's the time to do it. You see it in Congress where congressional representatives and senators will get up there and they'll speak, and they'll have 3 minutes or 5 minutes, or in some cases, you'll see these guys up there with charts doing marathon messaging. And we're getting a little bit of that in Poway. And I think that's a really good thing, even if it makes the meeting longer. So what? I mean, that's what this meeting is about that discussion. So, but he was saying, we're going to be making decisions on water rates that are going to be enacted for the next 4 years. We're going to be making decisions on the city budget that are going to impact people in District 1 right away. But you guys want to have an election that's not going to happen until much later, so that the people on District 1 can't participate in having a representative to vote on the water rates or vote on the budget. And I just thought, oh, come on, man, don't go there. Because there's a way to do it. I mean, you could schedule an election, and I know you can't do it immediately. There's a timing. You got to synchronize with the registrar of voters. You got to schedule it. And maybe it's not going to happen for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. But yeah, but you can appoint someone in the short term, but you obviously would have a commitment to an election in the medium term. But they're not doing that. And so I just thought that was a bit of a cop-out. It was more like, you don't need democracy. Don't worry about it. We're smarter than everybody. We can do it for you. It's the philosopher king angle to it. He was scolding Hiram Soto. Apparently Hiram was doxing, I guess, releasing names or emails of people. I don't know the detail on that. I don't know if that's true, but that came off as a little bit of finger wagging up there. Again, it's a style thing. It's not like he's breaking the law like the problem we have with Tony Blaine. That's a serious problem. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but with the Tony Blaine story, he was making threats to some of his constituents about calling the police on them. I mean, that whole thing, the whole Tony Blaine thing is just whacked. Um, but anyways, it was interesting that Peter DeHoff kind of got into Hiram Soto's column that he published in the Pomerado News, San Diego Union Tribune, calling for the special election. And Hiram Soto brought up examples of Encinitas and Lemon Grove, and there was one other community, was a Coronado, I think, that we're dealing with this problem. Do we do an appointment? Do we do a special election? And DeHoff actually went to some of those meetings or knows some of those city council members in those different cities because he serves on other boards with them, which is common for city council members, like water boards and that sort of thing. And so Peter DeHoff's digging, he's getting his information. He was basically calling out Hiram Soto saying, what you're talking about here isn't real. It's not accurate. It's it's disconnected from reality. And I know I had such mixed feelings about this. Like on one level, it's good he's out there, DeHoff, doing his homework, talking to people, gathering facts. But when you're doing it all in defense of preventing the people from choosing their own representative, then that's not a good look. Okay. And, did Hiram Soto embellish the truth? I don't know. According to you, Peter DeHoff, he did. In the end, I think when you are saying to the people, we're not going to let you choose, that is just like a flat out violation of what democracy is supposed to be all about. Now, of course, Peter DeHoff, says, well, most of us up here have been elected by a democracy, and an appointment process is part of the democratic process. Okay, that's true, but come on. I mean, the whole idea of a democracy is that the people are the ones that are making decisions. And here we're, and granted, it's not a pure democracy, and that's a whole other angle, but selecting your representative is an important thing, in my opinion. I mean, if you're going to have a local government and the local government is going to make decisions about your community, then the people that are on that board that are making those decisions should be chosen by the people, okay? Not by the other city council members. No matter how virtuous and how intelligent and how above board our philosopher kings might be on the city council, it's not really their job to do this sort of thing. I mean, yeah, according to the letter of law, I guess they have the ability to do an appointment. And they could do an appointment on the short term, but the right thing to do is do an election. But they didn't. They ended up doing the appointment. And I know that Chris Pikus was appointed. In that 20-minute clip, you hear a little bit about Peter DeHoff talking about Chris Pikus and his resume. And we all kind of knew he was the favorite going in. And Peter, to his credit, really praised Pete Neild, my good buddy, who was on my podcast talking about some of his innovative ideas for Poway. And Peter appreciated a lot of the things that Pete Neild had talked about. So that came out in it. So I really liked the speech in terms of him doing a speech. And I would love to see that from Jenny Maeda and from and from Chris Pikus as a newly appointed member. I want to hear more from these people. And the same thing is true, with Mayor Vaus, we get enough of Mayor Vaus. I mean, but we can always use more. I mean, I think the more that our local politicians are listening and speaking, the better, so rather than creating the appearance that a lot of things are happening behind closed doors. But it was something. And Peter DeHoff brought up another interesting dynamic, and it's an interesting one. I never really thought of it in these terms, about how there's a natural cycle to the election. We have the election every 4 years, or, if it's staggering, it's every 2 years, like we have in Poway, where, you go into election and people are heated and maybe divisive, and there's, good guy candidate against evil guy candidate, and they fight it out, and their supporters fight it out. And according to Peter DeHoff's perception of this is that, then you go through a natural healing process after that. And it's a natural part of the process that Thomas Jefferson talked about in the founding of America. And that the appointment is another way that healing process can occur, and that eventually we get to another election cycle in 2 or 4 years. Okay. I mean, I understand your point, Peter, but come on, you got to let people vote on these sorts of things. And I think it just has to be like a key priority in local government to have local representation. I mean, it's like a fundamental core pillar of what local government is supposed to be about. And so he made a very rational presentation from his point of view on why the appointment process was right, but I still don't buy it. Does that mean that I think he should be recalled? No, I don't. I don't think he is committed as flagrant of a sin or flagrant of a foul as certainly as Tony Blaine. Um, even the recall effort on Mayor Vaus. I mean, there were some, in my opinion, some good reasons to bring that forward to a vote. Whether or not the vote should have passed, I think, is debatable. There were certain things that Mayor Vaus has done that I have not been a fan of. There are other things he does that I like. And that's just the way it is with most politicians. So Peter DeHoff now under fire. So Jenny Maeda must be thinking, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Because now she's elected. She was very brave. She got up on city council to run against Kalen Frank when no one else would oppose Kalen Frank. She's up there and she just looks right down the aisle and she sees Peter DeHoff is under attack, threats of recall, sees Chris Pikus there that represents the seat that Brian Pepin had and all the controversy around the appointment there. And then who's the other one that I'm missing in here? Am I missing someone? I might be. And then of course there's Mayor Vaus, who, Mayor Vaus is a very visible icon here in Poway with his cowboy hat. And he's got haters and he's got supporters. And here we go. So the Poway, the city and the country, having a little drama at City Hall. And in a way, for me as a podcaster, it gives me something to talk about. So I like that. On a perverse level, it's kind of a little bit entertaining, but there's some serious things that are being discussed. And I'm hoping a lot of this stuff is going to unfold and we're going to see what happens. In my opinion, I don't think there's ever going to be enough traction to recall Peter DeHoff. I just don't see that happening. I encourage the people that are going for the recall to go for it. I think recalls are healthy. But I don't see that rising to the level of a recall. Tony Blaine, I have no idea what's going to happen here. Tony Blaine is a guy that is representing District 2. He could find himself in trouble with the law, maybe. I don't know. I mean, there may be a recall around him. There's people that are calling on him to resign. He might fight back and, say, screw you. And I'm representing this. And this is why I'm in office. And this is why the people elected me. And I'm going to pursue my aggressive agenda. I think Tony Blaine is going to be interesting to see. We'll see more info on him.